I've worked with engineers, with operators, with professionals that are quietly on the side making 50 to 100 to, a guy told me the other day, $150,000 on the side through consulting. There was no big brand, so some of them not even websites, no fancy corporate funnels as we would call them in the marketing world. But they all do some of the same similar things, and that's what I want to share with you. As I've talked to so many in the past, I just kind of looked at what are the 7 patterns that I'm seeing, or what are the patterns, and it turns out there's about 7 here, and I'm going to give them to you. If you're an engineer, professional, some tech, especially somebody with tech skills, these are the kind of things that are triggers or indicators of things that you might be able to do to move the dollars in consulting. So the first one, number one, they don't wait to be asked. They step in before they are invited. You don't wait to be asked. So for instance, a plant engineer was telling me, so looking at my notes here, plant engineer said a company kept coming with the same issue. A production line would shut down randomly about a couple times a week. And everyone just got used to it, right? Like we do in a lot of things. They got used to the process. He didn't. He told the department manager, he said, I think it's a controls issue upstream, and I'm going to dig into it for a day or two. And so this is on his day job, right? He says he mapped it out, found the root cause, and reduced the downtime by 30%, right? There's something to put on your LinkedIn profile. But that thing he did on his day job, because he stepped a little bit further than his normal work, is created internal visibility. But eventually, when one of the managers of the plant moved to another job, he now could get consulting gigs from him, because the guy was like, I know a guy, right, that can fix this. So that's how his consulting started. He didn't wait to be asked. He just went out there and started solving problems. And for most professionals, that's what we do anyway. That's what we enjoy doing. So do that, be visible. That's the key here. The second one here is they stay close to problems, not skills. I constantly am seeing people like, I'm going to go back and get a certification in this and certification in that. Well, that's fine, but that's leading with the tools, and that's going to keep you small. That's fine to do, but that's if that's what you lead with, that keeps you small. They instead lead with problems. So for an example, one of the people I'm talking to, a data analyst, healthcare industry, says he said experts were all the people were asking for reports in the different departments, but they didn't agree. They had different numbers for things, and instead of saying I built dashboards to figure this out, what he did is he said your data doesn't match across your systems, and that's why no one trusts reports. And if you think about it, that's what happens when you see reports internally and they don't match, right? People just kind of blow them off, and they just, well, that's, we pay no attention to that. Those kind of things, when you hear those, are triggers. And so he was just seeing the problem and not worrying about whether he was a data analyst and had all these certifications. But he started reconciling the sources and documenting inconsistencies and just figuring out what was going on. So within months of doing this, after solving their problem, he was in executive meetings. Just out of nowhere, he was in executive meetings. He was guiding decisions, and later he started doing consulting for small clinics, dealing with similar issues. Right, it was, and because it was smaller clinics than what he was used to, it was easy for him. He'd seen it before. See, people don't pay for tools; they pay for problems to be solved. Right, and so stay close to the problems. Not your skills. You can learn skills. Nobody really cares. So number 3 is they talk to people constantly. Now, a lot of people will tell me, well, engineers, technical people, we're introverts, and that's we don't talk to people constantly. I don't think that's true. I think maybe you don't want to go into a big networking event, or you don't want to do these kind of things, but asking questions is usually pretty easy because, when you ask questions of people, they talk. There's a guy that one of my clients, he's an IT infrastructure guy. So and he just made a habit of he would grab coffee once a week with somebody outside of his team, usually inside of his own company, but sometimes in other companies. And it wasn't networking. It wasn't this formal process. He would just, it was just curiosity. Hey, I'm kind of interested in what you guys do over there. He might meet somebody in a meeting that was, in a multiple departments over and say, hey, I'm kind of interested in what you said in the meeting. Can we grab coffee one day? So it's simple, right? So one of his conversations with HR serviced a problem. He's sitting there having coffee, and they're just talking about they're chatting about their problems, and their onboarding process was a mess. The new hires would wait days for system access, right in his domain, right? So he offered to map it out, right? No, he's not in his department of nothing. So this small fix turned into a lot of visibility across departments. He was one of the few guys that could speak across the departments. He now understood what was going on in HR, and he started improving other workflows inside the company. That eventually, as you could see, led to him helping somebody else in another company that had left and were another company. And hey, there was a guy back in my old job that helped with that, and he gets a consulting gig out of it. He didn't market. He just listened, right? Just having conversations. So number 4, they say yes before they feel ready. Say yes before they feel ready. And boy, this is a big one. This one was a big one for me because a lot of times I figured things out after I committed to it. Now that sounds sleazy? No. That sounds incompetent? No. We're technical people. We can figure things out. Right? That's part of our innate ability. We can figure this stuff is not that complicated usually. We can figure things out. So there was a mid-level project manager that I'm talking to the other day, and he said, I was asked, can you help us clean up our vendor processes, that they had with their external vendors? And he didn't know anything about vendor optimization. Again, outside his department, but somebody just thought, hey, maybe you can help us. Probably a conversation, right? He had seen enough broken processes because he was, as a project manager, right? He said, sure. He mapped out the workflow, identified bottlenecks, and simplified approval chains, right? And again, none of this is rocket science. It takes somebody from the outside coming in. That's what consultants do, right? And he ended up with fewer errors. This became his first real consulting style win, even though inside of his own organization. You see, confidence doesn't come first. It comes during the work, right? We all know that. Even in school, right? When you weren't necessarily confident when you moved into a new subject, as you did it, you became confident. And so we all, anybody who has technical chops, you can figure things out. I'm pretty confident of most people that we can figure things out, especially given all the resources at your hand. So jump in. They start before they feel ready. Number 5, they start small and get paid early. That's a big one, right? They don't wait to build something perfect. Now, this is a problem that many engineer types, technical types, analytical types, we want things polished, smooth, clean, finished, right? We want everything done perfectly. We can't stand it if we have a Word document that all the fonts are or off, or that a Excel spreadsheet that things aren't labeled properly. It makes us nuts, right? But so here's a quality engineer talking to, and he said he noticed a supplier kept failing audits. One of their particular suppliers always failed the audits, or frequently failed the audits. Instead of complaining, or instead of talking bad about him and doing all the things we do, he said, "Let me do a quick review and give you a list of fixes." So he charged a small fee to the supplier. Now this was it was one of these cases that sounds like it could be a conflict of interest, but because of his circumstances, it wasn't. I forget the details, but he charged a small fee and delivered them a clear report. He just, let me look, and get you a clear report about what's going on. It turned into an ongoing sport, then interactions with other suppliers in other fields, because word travels. So his first dollar was not a perfect plan. His first dollar was to kind of figure out what's going on here. In other words, both parties were learning while they were paying. And if you're sitting there thinking, well, that's not valuable, it's extremely valuable to have somebody. If you've got something broken and it's feeding your customer and it causes you a black eye frequently, to have somebody come in from the outside and look at what's going on objectively and say, here's your problems. Because once you've identified a problem, right, most of us can get it fixed. And in this case, most of that got fixed by them. And then he started not only identifying problems in other companies, but of course they would say, can you fix it? And so many of them he fixed and became a consulting contract for him. So they start small, get paid early. Right? So number 6, they follow up when others don't. This is a big deal. This is where most of us drop the ball. And we see this internally inside the companies. We see this externally. So an engineer I know that had a casual conversation with a former colleague. And so they were friends, right? They were having lunch, is what he was saying, and they're talking about work stuff. We're struggling with system integration after a recent upgrade became the issue that they talked about. So the engineer client of mine says, he said, part of me was thinking, well, yeah, good luck with that, as we parted ways. But then he sent him an email later that night, and he says, I've been thinking about what you said at lunch, and so this was later that night, and he says, if I were approaching this, I would look at 2 different areas. No long thought out strategy, just like top of my head, a couple things. I'm driving back to the office came to my mind, right? Boom, that led to a phone call. His friend calls him the next day. They end up, he says, can you come and talk to my boss or the manager, whoever it was, and they got into a deeper conversation and became a paid consulting engagement. Follow-up creates opportunity. So many times this has been the deal maker for me. Simple follow-up, not complex letters, not offer stuff, but just, here's a couple of thoughts for you. I'm doing that as we speak. Well, not as we speak, but I was just doing that this morning, saying, hey, here's a couple of thoughts for you. I'm not charging for that. I'm just throwing some thoughts your way, and if it's useful to you, then we'll talk further. So that's follow up. Keep that conversation going. Number 7, charge sooner than you think. They don't stay in free mode. Now, free mode is a really hard one for us. I was on a conversation just yesterday, and a guy was telling me that he says, I do, and he was rattling off all the kind of things he's involved with and the companies he's helped, and he says, my wife kind of gets irritated about me doing so much free work. That was a big to him, that was just a passing comment. To me, that's a big red flag. First of all, when your wife says a small comment, it's not small. But I remember a friend of mine who's a very well-paid consultant, and I remember him telling me, he said, I used to not charge much for my work and for the kind of things that we're doing here, the things that he was a consultant for. He says, I was good at it and I would help people. And my wife told me one day that you are stealing from our children because you're giving away your skills and your work for free. And he's not in ministry mode, even though he was an ex-missionary. At this moment, this is how he got paid. So it got his attention. So staying in free mode is dangerous for so many reasons. And it's so much bigger than this because credibility. Credibility goes with money. So this mechanical engineer that I know was helping some small companies troubleshoot a recurring equipment issue. All right. In factories and things, or actually pick a business, throw a rock, you'll hit something that's loaded up with problems. There's just problems everywhere. But in his case, it was manufacturing. And he said, after a few conversations, they were talking about looking at the problem. He says, look, because he had kind of offered some free thoughts, much like the thing I said, the email. Here's some thoughts about that. And the guy says, it keeps asking him questions. He said, look, if you want me to stay involved and help implement this, and I love the way he said this, we should formalize this. Because that says so many things. That says we need to protect each other, legally, in case I do something that, upsets things, or in case you do something, that I'm not going to sue you. And so it's not this big formal agreement, but it's a structured formalizing things because we're doing business and you're helping us. I mean, the fact that he's in a manufacturing plant, the whole point of the manufacturing plant is to manufacture widgets so they can sell them, right? And if I can do that to make that process better, I deserve to get paid. And so, hey, the guy agreed immediately. He says, yeah, he thought about, I should have thought about that. I'm sorry. He apologized. The customer in this case apologized for taking advantage of him and said, no, we need to do that. And they hurry up and sign a little piece of paper, agreed to pay him. And boom, he's off. And he says, people will pay, and this was his words, people will pay faster than you expect. That's been my experience. People will pay faster than you expect. And you just need to be aware. And this is a hard one for all of us. This is a hard one for me. You need to be aware that you are offering valuable service and you are taking your time. And time is money. So look, these are the 7 things here. None of what I have told you is super complicated. Actually, none of it's complicated at all. But we get caught in the world of consulting and we want to go down the deep, dark, technical, complicated factors. But these things are simple. They're your skill sets are already good enough. You have a lot to offer in the market. But if you take even one of these, and one of these 7 things I talked about, act this week on it, things will start to change. All right, so let me give you just one call to action for you. Reach out to one person this week and say, hey, what's the hardest thing on your plate right now? A friend, a former coworker, somebody even inside the company. Don't pitch, just listen, and then see that where it leads. See you next week.